tonight at 8 minutes past 11.
Columbia is coming home tonight with one computer out. President Reagan lifts the ban on arms sales to our evening. The Space Shuttle Columbia is hoping to limp home tonight with one of its main computers and a key navigational aid out of action. Its landing this afternoon was postponed as ground control tried to work out what had gone wrong. The computer, which helps to guide Columbia through space, failed when the shuttle was jolted by one of its own thruster rockets. But a short time ago, the six-man crew was given the go-ahead to return. We'll be showing you pictures of the landing at about 5 minutes to midnight. Here in London, David Chater has been following Columbia's progress.
The mission commander, John Young, first reported a problem when he fired one of the powerful maneuvering thrusters in the nose of the shuttle. A huge jolt shook the spacecraft, equivalent to 19 times the force of gravity, and started the whole of the nose of the craft rocking up and down. There was speculation that one of the forward thrusters might have exploded. At the same time, one of their main flight control computers broke down. 5 attempts to restore it ended in failure. A second computer went down when they fired the thrusters again. They've managed to repair that one, but Mission Control decided to postpone the planned landing until they could find out what was going wrong. The space shuttle has 5 onboard computers, any one of which can control a landing. They've enough oxygen, food and fuel aboard the shuttle anyway to last 3 days yet. The scientists have been working on a set of identical computers on the ground to try and track down the problem. They're now at least certain it won't recur again, and are all set to come down tonight, just before midnight our time. The shuttle was designed and built by the American company Rockwell.
What we don't know is exactly what happened. So that's why all the brains back home are in the simulation labs going through just what happens when you do what he did to see if we can determine what it is that actually happened before we decide to make the next move to deorbit.
The flight computers are essential to control wing flaps, rocket thrusting and guidance as the spacecraft returns to Earth. Traveling at speeds in excess of 17,000 miles an hour as it begins its descent, the shuttle, nicknamed the Flying Brick, eventually slows to a landing speed of 200 miles an hour as it burns its way through the atmosphere. There's no way a pilot could safely guide it down manually at such speeds. So NASA must be convinced their remaining onboard computers
willing to lift their embargo.
Columbia have been given the go-ahead to land after a computer fault forced it to stay in orbit. The 6-man team are due to touch down in about an hour, and we'll bring you those pictures live.
Space Shuttle is due to land in about half an hour's time, nearly 8 hours late. The craft, which has been in space for 10 days, got into trouble earlier today when it fired its thrusters to change course for Earth. Ground control said a computer failed and the craft juddered. The 6 astronauts tried again, and again a computer blew. The latest...
Rejoin Newsnight.
And gear contact. Nose down at 10:07, 47:41. And STS-9 is home from the longest shuttle mission to date.
That noise we hear, Jeffrey, I think is the escorting aircraft flying.
That's the chase planes flying by and just clearing the area.
What purpose do these planes serve?
Well, if there's a problem, if there's been a problem in orbit, and this is the first chance really to see if there's some tiles missing in critical areas, for example, the undercarriage, if it sticks, there's too late to do anything about it. They're there really to assist the crew seeing from outside the general situation of the shuttle itself.
Is it unnerving for the pilots to be coming down like that without any power? I mean, for instance, unlike an ordinary airliner, if something goes wrong just before they land, they can't take off again.
Well, you would think it would be unnerving. In fact, they have such excellent training, for one thing, and the other thing is they do have excellent computer aids all the way down, so they know they're in the right position. The time they would become unnerved would be a long way further back if they really had got into some problem and couldn't quite make that full range. The last phase is really bringing an ordinary glider down, but much faster.
What speed is it when it touches down
It's
roughly?
about 214 knots, so about 220, 25 miles an hour as it touches down.
Is that much faster than
Oh yes,
a
it's
Trident,
quite,
say, or
yes, it's
Boeing
quite a bit faster,
737?
but not unduly faster. It's no faster than a fighter plane.
What do you think will have been learned from the breakdown of the computer on this occasion?
Well, it's an interesting one. Talking to the manufacturers earlier today, it's by no means apparent whether the computer failed before they fired the motors or whether the little reaction control motors, which adjust the attitude, caused the computer failure. It seems to be more likely the computer. I think the problem is these computers, the four main computers, vote really to decide if they're all in agreement with decisions. And when one goes out or two go out, as of today, then this is quite a problem. They have to decide which is wrong. So I think what they've learned from this particular thing is the necessity to be able to react, as they've done, to some part of the system failing, and the Americans have had excellent experience on this in earlier flights of Apollo, to react and be able to adjust and carry on the mission. They've done this very well. As I said before, I think in a way, although one doesn't like failures, it does prove just how powerful this vehicle is to be able to accommodate a failure of that type.
Jeffrey Pardo, thank you very much indeed for joining us and for talking us through the final.
Safely last night after a successful 10-day mission with Spacelab on board. The 6 astronauts had to deal with technical problems right up to the last minute and landed 8 hours later than scheduled. Mark Chataway reports.
The Space Shuttle Columbia re-entered Earth's atmosphere at 17,500 miles an hour last night with the £750 million European Space Lab aboard. Columbia's return had been delayed by almost 8 hours because of computer problems. The shuttle could still have landed quite safely, but NASA kept it in space to try and find out exactly what had gone wrong. None of the crewmen seemed too worried by the delay. John Young, the flight commander, used it to get a 3-hour nap. 30,000 spectators watched as the 114-ton Columbia touched down at Edwards Air Force Base in California at 11:47 London time. Scientists are at work this morning starting the astronauts on 8 days of exhaustive medical tests to see if they're as fit as they look.
Touchdown at 13 minutes to midnight our time at Andrews Air Base in California.
Columbia approaching pre-final, 17,000 feet, coming down at 128 feet per second, 10 miles from the runway. Still in manual flight control mode. Commander John Young controlling the vehicle. Gear coming down. Gear down and locked. And we have touchdown, unofficial touchdown time for the main gear, 10:07:47:23. Nose gear coming down.
Ian Ridpath is with us. It was a lovely touchdown, wasn't it?
There's absolutely awesome pictures those, aren't they? And remember that John Young, the shuttle commander, he had missed a night's sleep because of all the problems they'd had, and certainly he was a very tired man, yet he brings it down as though the thing were on rails.
I think relief after all the tension that was going on before, of course, the computer fault and worrying about touching down on time.
It was very strange. It's something that they've not faced before. That their problems really started just before noon our time yesterday, when the scientists had finished their work in the Space Lab space station and they'd shut it up and were going back into the crew compartment at the front of the shuttle. And John Young was just manoeuvring the craft by firing some little thrusters at the front. And he reported there was a big jolt and the whole craft shook. And first one and then a second computer stopped working, and nobody understood why. And the intended landing was immediately postponed while the Americans tried to work it out. They still, I don't think, have worked out exactly what went wrong. And the first computer never did start working again, but they managed to get the second one going. And with that, they could come back, because they have 5 in all, which back each other up.
So it wasn't a real scary moment for them?
Well, at one stage, around about tea time yesterday, it was starting to look rather bad, because if every time they fired these thrusters, the computers went out, it was a problem, and they need those thrusters and those computers to bring them back down. But in the end, that they got back successfully with what they had. But yes, I was starting to get a little bit worried yesterday afternoon, I must say.
It wouldn't help relationships between, of course, the space control on the ground and the spaceship. There was a lot of tension in the air, wasn't there, in this last period?
That's right.
Finally,
yes.
The computers failing must have added to that tension.
Yes, indeed. But certainly, as I've said before, I still wouldn't like to swap places with any of those astronauts on board that space shuttle. I think for Ulf Merbold, the German, it must have been rather worrying, although it's been a very satisfactory flight, 10 days performing scientific experiments in orbit. And I suppose NASA might be wondering if they kept the space shuttle up there for too long on its 10-day flight. Because let's remember that the shuttle was designed originally only for 7 days a week in orbit. They'd extended it already to make it a 9-day flight, and by then squeezing that extra 10th day out of it, perhaps they were running it a little bit too long, because I certainly got the feeling by the time the thing touched down last night, because it wasn't just 2 computers which had failed, also one of the navigation units had failed on board. And I just got the feeling that the whole spacecraft was quietly falling to pieces on them by the time they got it back down again.
Let me, on that note, bring in Jimmy Hill. Would you like to be up there on a space shuttle looking down on it all?
I get car sick if somebody else is driving. I'm one of those people I don't travel all that well if things bounce about. If they could guarantee a smoother flight of the landing, yes, I wouldn't mind. I mean, I don't think I'd actually be, well, silly to say you wouldn't be frightened, but I mean, I don't really have that sort of fear. I mean, I think somebody's clever enough to get me up there. I trust in them completely.
You're a great innovator, of course. I was imagining that you'd love to do something like that from scratch because it's such a good idea.
Well, I'd love to do it as long as I wasn't going to be sick in the process.
Can you guarantee that, Ian Ritpard?
No,
What's it like up there?
They're still working on this space sickness problem, and I must say I don't think I'd like to go. I don't like flying very much, and space sickness was one of the things that they're still studying. They still cannot work out exactly why a lot of people do seem to get sick when they go into space. A lot of the experiments were to do with that, and in fact by using the scientists themselves as guinea pigs, you sort of shake them about and try and make them feel sick. Quite a few of them were actually sort of feeling queasy as a result of the experiment.
You're making me feel...
Yes, a wonderful breakfast time subject. I can tell you how they go to the toilet as well if you like.
No, I think we'll have you back at another time, Ian Ritpard, to talk about that. In the meantime, thank you very much. Here's
the navigational device failed.